Hi guys, Matt from Some Fish Aquariums here with episode 3 of our series, Beginner to Pro Fast. This is the series where we tell you just what you need to know about planted tanks. And today we're going to tell you just what you need to know about fertilizer. So the first thing we'll talk about is nutrients and the nutrients that your fertilizer gives when you dose those liquid fertilizers into your aquarium. And the second thing we're going to talk about is consistency over time. Alright, so the first thing to know about nutrients is it gets really confusing really quickly. So basically we're going to break it down really simple, and there's macros and micros. But what you need to know is that you can get an all-in-one fertilizer like APT3 and just dose that, or if you like Thrive S, that's fine. The Nylac G Thrive. Any of those all-in-ones. Aquarium Co-op is getting a lot of popularity lately. So any of these all-in-one fertilizers will do about the same thing. And we don't really need to get into the weeds of the macros and micros. So I'm going to leave those details out because this is the just what you need to know series. So the first thing I want to cover is what kind of water are you using? This kind of gets into a different topic and maybe a different video in my future for the series. But for the sake of this video and the fertilizer, we're going to talk about using RO water with maybe diluted with 1/3 of tap water, so that you've got 2/3 RO water, 1/3 tap water. The reason for that is you want some calcium and magnesium, and those aren't usually in those all-in-one fertilizers, but those are important nutrients for your aquarium. So what you want to do is, if you can use Equilibrium, those products that kind of, if you just want to do 100% RO, some people like to be able to control and know exactly what's in their water. I don't find that super necessary, but so let's talk about that real quick. You can do 100% RO water and remineralize it with Equilibrium, following the directions. That'll do the same thing as what I'm going to recommend. Is just use 2/3 RO water mixed with your tap water, but make sure that you're not using your water softener in your home. If you have those water softeners with those salt crystals, I have other videos, we talk about that in detail. Those are going to kill your plants. So don't use the water softener with the salt crystals. All right. So the reason we mix the little bit of tap water is it's going to have a little bit of calcium and magnesium for your plants. So, and then we're always doing those 25% water changes every week. All right, let's pull up our chart here. This gets really confusing really quickly, but if you're new to fertilizer regimens, you will see a lot of talk about 3 popular methods of fertilizing your aquarium. So the first one, and it's kind of a left to right kind of a spectrum, where they're on different ends, like complete opposites basically, and then there's some in the middle, right? And most people don't follow these like 100% to the rules, but it's good to just kind of understand the principle of what they're trying to say. So real quick, the first one is lean dosing. That's where you give the plants just enough nutrients to get by, and that way there's not really any algae, and your plants have everything they need with no extras in the water. The pros to lean dosing is that your plants don't grow as fast, so the maintenance is a little bit easier. It's really important to have a rich substrate if you're going to do lean dosing, so those aqua soils are what you want to use for that. Now, we talked about this already, but APT3 is the product that is kind of made for lean dosing. That's what the 2-hour aquarist recommends in this kind of setup, and they like it because you don't have to do as much maintenance. It keeps, if you're trying to grow a specific look in your planted tank, maybe you have that Iwagami with the kind of like just a low carpet. Those get to be a lot of maintenance if you go with other methods. So lean dosing is kind of recommended if you want to try to keep a specific look to your plants without having to like constantly trim them and change things up. Also, aquascapers like to do lean dosing if they have a lot of hardscape, because there's not as many plants to take up the nutrients. So the next one is the PPS Pro. So with PPS Pro, they're trying to keep the nitrates and the trace elements measured and continue dosing, but kind of change it as needed and keep it consistent across the board so that they're not constantly changing what's in the water. The next one is estimative index dosing. This one is basically where you overdose the aquarium. I'm going to say that loosely. You're not actually overdosing the tank, but compared to like lean dosing, you're adding in basically more nutrients than the tank can handle, and this gives some of the harder to grow plants all the extra nutrients that they need. Um, the downside to EI dosing is that your plants will grow too crazy, too fast. Most people have trouble keeping up with that trimming and maintenance schedule of that. And then if things grow too quickly, they create like kind of a canopy, and then they shade the lower, smaller plants, or even just the bottom of their own stems. So you can have a lot of issues with the EI dosing. And if you forget a water change, then you're really messing things up. All right, so there's really those three methods of dosing your fertilizer for your aquarium. Now, I kind of do my own thing, and I think most people kind of do the same thing, where they learn about these methods and then they find out what works good for them, and it's kind of a blend of all three, really. So for beginner to pro, we want to be able to grow plants fast. That's one of our main goals. I want to double the plant growth every month. I want to be able to cut them in half and replant them and have twice as many plants in about 30 days. My method that I'm going to recommend for the beginner to pro series is to take like an APT3, those complete fertilizers, take their recommended dose from the bottle for whatever size tank you have, and cut it in half on the first day of you setting up your aquarium, right? So you'll put in half of the dose, and hopefully it breaks it down to how much per day. APT3 does give you that daily dose that they expect per gallon, right? So whatever that recommended dose size is for your tank when you first set up your tank, or even if you're down the road and you have not like full planted tank where it's kind of sparsely planted, do half of the recommended dosing for the first 2 or 3 weeks. Also do 25% water change with that schedule, okay? Now, as you get into weeks 2 and 3 and your plant mass has grown quite a bit, maybe even close to double, you're going to want to increase your fertilizer and your lighting, right? So increase that fertilizer to the recommended dose, right? So if you were doing 1 milliliter per day, now I want you to go 2 milliliters per day, okay? Keep that going for another 2 weeks. So at about weeks 4 and 5, if your tank is fully planted and the growth is really strong, now you can go all the way up to 1.5 times the dose on the bottle. If you are seeing algae at any point in time, I would lower the amount of lighting and cut back, just kind of stay put at those nutrients or dial it back just a little bit. So now that you've walked your way through the beginning of your tank, you'll learn the plant's needs and the nutrients that they need, and you'll identify, okay, their growth is good, so we're just going to keep it at that 1.5 times dosing. So like we started off at 1 milliliter, and then we went to the full 2 milliliter, and then we're going to go to 3 milliliters per day. That's what I'm doing here. If you ever see a plant deficiency, like little holes in the plants, or the leaves just kind of don't look right, their colors are off, that's when you'll probably want to increase the fertilizer. So for dosing your tanks, you'll want to use a pipette like this. That will make it really easy to get how much you want. So again, I'm recommending using APT3 or a similar all-in-one fertilizer. And what you want to do is use half of the recommended dose for the first couple weeks, and then when the plant growth is coming in really strong, then up that to the regular recommended dose. And then after about a month to 5 weeks, increase that dosing to 1.5 times needed recommended dose on the bottle. So I recommend using like an APT3 for that, these all-in-one fertilizers. I'll leave the links in the description below, like always. Now there's one fertilizer that you can use to supplement the APT3 without causing any issues. So if you start seeing any kind of holes in your leaves, which is very common, it's a telltale sign that you don't have enough potassium, and dosing extra potassium almost never causes a problem. So you can go in a lot of extra potassium without causing any trouble. The easiest way to do that is through leaf zone. It's iron and potassium is all that's in this bottle. And I just do like 1 milliliter for a 20-gallon about twice a week. And then you should see those problems kind of go away if you do see them at all. All right, and then with that schedule of dosing, make sure you keep up on the 25% water change. That's going to make sure that you have that magnesium and calcium from the tap water. Now let's get into consistency. So you don't ever want to have more than 10 parts per million nitrate swing, right? So if you normally run about 20 parts per million of nitrates, which is about where most planted tanks aim for, so you can get a little test kit and measure, but you want your nitrates to never swing more than 10. So if you're starting at 20 and you end the week at 30, that was a good week, and you can do your water change and then set it back to 20, and you could do that every week and you'd be just fine. Or another example would be if you had started at 20 and it swings down a little bit to 15 throughout the week, but then it ends up sometimes at 25. That's within that 10 points, right? 15 to 25. So that would be fine as well. If you have more nitrate swing than 10 points, you're going to end up with issues where the plant is trying to adapt to those nutrients. Your plant will have trouble growing with those changing environments, right? So if you keep it stable within those 10 points of nitrates, that will be really beneficial for your plants. All right, so consistency is kind of tricky in the beginning, right? That's why we kind of showed this ramp up from week 1 and 2, where you're doing that half dose. As your plants are growing so much, it's hard to know, like, if you don't adjust that fertilizer to that plant growth, things change consistency-wise, where the nitrates that your plants are taking up, maybe they're taking up at first like 5 parts per million per week, but then after they doubling the amount of plant mass, they might start taking up like 10 parts per million per week or more. And then, like, that's why we have to adjust our fertilizer to account for the plant's needs. They're going to be uptaking more nutrients than they were before. Once over time your tank is grown in and all the plants are grown, and they pretty much stay at the once you have the same amount of plants every week, after about maybe 5 or 6 weeks in, you'll have a full plant mass, and you'll get to learn exactly how much nutrients they take every week. All right, so weeks 1 and 2, we had that half dose recommended, and then after 2 weeks, we're going to up that to the full dose recommended on that all-in-one fertilizer. And then once we get about a month in, we can adjust based on if we're seeing algae or nutrient deficiencies in the plants. We can go all the way up to 1.5 times if needed of the daily recommended dose for that fertilizer. As you increase your fertilizer, increase your lighting, right? So you can adjust that power up from 50% at the first week to 60% and then up to 70%. Also, that photo period of the lights, you can adjust from 6 hours up to 8 hours over time. After 5 weeks, that consistency will kick in, where you'll probably be at like 1.5 times that recommended daily dose on that. And if you see any algae, you dial it back a little bit. If you see any plant nutrient deficiencies, like holes in the leaves or just weird growth in the leaves, dial it up a little bit. All right, we haven't talked about this one, but it's CO2. It's not quite nutrient related, but I would say it's they're all related, right? It's the balance of the aquarium. So with CO2, I like to run a light green drop checker by the time the CO2 turns off, around an hour before the lights go out. So you want that CO2 drop checker to be light green. All right, so that's all you need to know about fertilizers from beginner to pro. All right, did you guys think that I missed anything that you would find a beginner would need to know to become a pro? I'm sure there's things that I didn't mention, but I think that gives you just what you need to know to become pro. And if I missed anything, please let our community know in the comments below. That would be really, really helpful for our community. All right, hit like and subscribe if you think other people would be interested in watching these videos. And make sure to subscribe to see the next episode in our series. Or if you're watching this in the future, after like several weeks after I've made this, look in the playlist for other videos in our series, Beginner to Pro Fast. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.